Welcome back. Well, yes, indeed, we are going to start off focusing on electricity tariff, the planned hike in tariff by the discos. So there's been this back and forth as to, yes, I think the July 1st date is when they expect that to happen, but the NERC's role, the disco's role, those are where you just get this back and forth. So let's find out. We'll have two gentlemen joining us this morning to shed some light on this matter. Honorable Francis Waive is the Deputy Chairman, House Committee on Power. He joins us from Abuja. We also do have Dr. Sam Amadi, who is a former chairman of NERC, who will be joining us via Skype. Gentlemen, good morning and thank you for joining us today. Honorable Francis, let me start with you on this matter. This is not a matter that is new to the House of Reps particularly, because they've had some perspectives on this matter previously. But now that this, it's about to happen on the 1st of July, even as reflected in some of the dailies this morning, what is the thinking perhaps of yourself or your colleagues about this planned tariff hike on July 1st?
Chamberlain, I want to thank you for having me, and good morning to Nigerians across the world. Our first concern really is for Nigerians to understand what is about happening. The 9th House of Representatives have been on the side of the people. We have championed the cause of the people to ensure that our people are not exploited by discos or by anybody. And that was why when it first came up, the April 1st date, if you recall, we had to engage the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. And I remember that we had a full-day session in Kano discussing with them on this planned hike. And that resulted in a shift in position whereby they are no longer looking at the cost-reflective tariff. Now we have moved to the service-reflective tariff, and that is what is going to take off from the 1st of July. Our worry as a house is that Nigerians should understand what is going to happen. It is not an increase across board. There are lots of Nigerians who will not experience this increase. And then there are those who will, because the increase is being tied to the service being enjoyed. For instance, those who enjoy 20 to 24 hours electricity are definitely going to experience this increase in tariff. But for those, for instance, who are suffering, as it were 4 hours daily, 5 hours daily, no increase. That is why we have told the discos, provide the service. Nigerians will not pay for darkness. That is what the House of Representatives, indeed the National Assembly, has been saying. You know, NEC has that duty to consult before releasing a new tariff. And when they did the consultation last February and March, that became an issue. Nigerians
I
will
need
not
to just
pay for
follow
darkness.
up on something.
And that is
Pardon me, I need to follow up on something you just said before you move on to your next point, so we don't lose your train of thought on that one. When you say not everybody will be experiencing this tariff, those who have about 20 hours of electricity are the ones to experience this increase in tariff. But the thing is, even if they are getting 10, 15, 20, 30 hours, it's not free. They already pay for it when they have, for those who have prepaid meter. So, or is it that those who are via estimated billing are the ones that will be largely affected? So what is the thinking or rationale behind that? I don't quite get it.
Now the issue here really is that Nigeria has one of the lowest tariffs in Africa as we speak. And the cost must be paid. The federal government has put in over 2 trillion naira since this process started to subsidize electricity, and the economy cannot sustain this. We can't continue like that. The last increase was in 2016, and from 2016 till date, there has not been any increase, but every other thing has increased. Every other commodity, every other thing on sale. There has been inflation, the exchange rate has has increased a lot of things, price of goods and commodities. So there must be an increase. But what we are saying is that Nigerians cannot pay for darkness. That is, you don't enjoy the electricity and yet you have to pay. So with the increase in rate for those who are enjoying it, you have your prepaid meter, of course. You buy your recharge card and you load it. The difference here is that the rate at which you are being charged will go up slightly for those who are enjoying electricity. But for those who are not, the discos and NEC have reached that point where those who are not enjoying electricity, who have 4 hours, 5 hours daily, will not experience any increase. And monitoring and evaluation mechanism have been built in place. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission is there to put the checks there. And we in the National Assembly are also going to check. And Nigerians out there are free. I encourage...
In other words, what this means, if I understand your point, is that previously those who have been paying and not enjoying electricity will still bear the burden again because there's no punitive measure whatsoever to those who were supposed to provide it and didn't provide.
Yeah. Yes, what we experienced previously was that everybody was like, let's say in an area, a flat rate. I don't mean countrywide now. I mean in an area, flat rate, such that even if you had 2 hours of electricity, somebody else have 20 hours, you pay the same thing. And how can you pay for what you don't enjoy? That was the challenge that came out of the consultation of last February, March, that stopped the April thing, in addition, to the COVID challenges. So that has been taken care of by migrating from the cost reflective tariff to the service reflective tariff, whereby we only now pay for what we enjoy. And in those, before now, it would appear like those who don't enjoy it pay more in a sense, and those who enjoy it pay less in that sense, because they are enjoying the privilege of this service for 20 hours at subsidized cost, as it were. Whereas those who are not enjoying it are paying for what they don't enjoy. That's the situation. The issue of estimated billing is being taken care of. The Nigeria Electricity Regulation Commission has come up with that capping that discos can no longer charge arbitrarily. There must be a benchmark with those who have prepaid meters in the vicinity, and you can't pay more than those who have prepaid meters. And for us in the National Assembly, our Speaker, the Right Honorable Femi Gbajami-Abila, has sponsored this bill to ban estimated billing. So progress is being made, and the federal government right now is intervening in terms of providing prepaid meters. And the process of mapping is going on around the country, and meters are gradually coming in. For those that have come in that have not been cleared at the ports, the Ministry of Power and the Ministry of Finance are discussing how to expedite clearance of these meters from the ports so that the issue of estimated billing can become a thing of the past. We must, at one of the,
I remember, I'd like you to clear something very quickly. Part of what you said a little while ago is that, how do we segregate those who have, how do we know, does your committee ensure, maybe oversight or supervision or whatever it is, that the discos do not charge the ones who, how do they segregate who gets what percentage of electricity in each day? Because once there is an increase in tariff, the normal thing is it goes across board. So how do you, ensure that that does not happen? How do we, is there a class of people that will enjoy power and a class of people that do not?
Now, what has happened is that this July 1st date is placing an obligation on the discos to increase their supply. You know that generation currently is very high, 13,000 thereabout, but what comes out through transmission is about 7,000. But what the discos provide is about 4, so there are losses along the line. And the federal government keeps paying. They pay the GENCOs, take or pay and all of that. But What is happening now is that the NEC, Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, now has that responsibility to provide metering between GENCOs and transmission, between transmission and DISCOs, and such that they are also having that obligation to check with the relevant area. So if the DISCO is saying, for example, that in Maitama, for example, 20 hours electricity is being provided, that the bill there will be increased, that the charges will increase, tariff will increase. But if, for example, in Gwagwalada, for example, only 4 hours is being provided, then there will be no increase. NEC has the responsibility, the primary responsibility, to check on this. And the Nigerian people also have that responsibility to speak out. We are too docile as a people. It's our responsibility that the ball is in our court.
Honorable,
of course, the National Assembly, the House Committee.
If you know, you've lived in this nation for long enough to know that unless there is an automation system, that monitoring is not going to happen. But let's very quickly take this to Dr. Sam Amadi, who is a former chairman of NERC. He joins us via Skype. Thank you for joining us this morning. First of all, what's your take on this electricity tariff increase? One of the conditions given was that meters need to go around and that there needs to be a performance improvement plan. Are you satisfied that that is in place already before this increase is effected?
No, at all. Well, meters will not go around. I mean, we have to be realistic going forward. All the assumptions and perhaps political speak should end. The fact of the matter is that this tariff increase is almost driven by necessity. The mathematics, the financing of the sector is difficult. We are aware that the federal government has tried to borrow some more money from the World Bank and other sources to try to improve on the network for maybe increased uptake in the short to medium term. But the critical point is that, look, in this sector, the burden has to fall somewhere. The burden of inefficiency, of escalating cost of production, and that burden is falling on the consumers. Again, if you set it as against the fact that the COVID-19 and all, even before COVID, had a severe fiscal challenge and economics were not good for the households and their income were depleted. So what this means, therefore, is any increase at this time would, of course, obviously affect consumers in terms of meaning that they're going to have more outlay to purchase erratic electricity than they had before. Again, what can the government do? Clearly, it's a case of, you can't make an omelette by breaking an egg. Either government is also borrowing, and the borrowing is to deal with this inefficiency and debt overhang in the sector. Again, consumers are going to pay more. I think the way out could be, yes, I totally see the reason why the tariff should go up, because if you look at the cost of production, it's a long time the tariff has stayed frozen. Inflation rates are going high, exchange rate is going high. Well, maybe not cost of gas. Again, quantity is small. Quantity is not growing. With greater quantity production, then arguably the cost can go down. So in that instance, I think metering is key here. But then you don't expect any significant metering in the next 1 year, because we have not seen any significant increase in metering in the last 6 to 1 year. What that therefore means is that consumers and customers have to pay more. And paying more does not, in these circumstances we see ourselves, go together with significant improvement. So government can either allow the tariff to go up as they're trying to do, and then use whatever funding they're getting to subsidize directly some class of customers. If you look at the Electricity Power Sector Reform Act, there were contemplations around very high rate of increase, but and then there was also provision for something like Consumer Assistance Fund. I think the problem with our electricity sector is that the classification of customers or consumers do not allow for the economics of dealing with those who can consume more, those who can consume less, those who are staying in places where they're imposing more cost on network, and those who are staying in places where it's not that expensive. Those who are, low, medium income earners, those who are very poor income earners. So if you disaggregate tariff structure, whether in terms of how much you consume, after some point, a new pricing kicks in. So basics are minimal or low price. Then after, let's say, 50 kilowatt per month, every other extra you take carries additional cost. Or you price it according to maybe the places people, geographical areas and their cost to production. So with the way our tariff is lumped together now, what's going to happen inevitably is that those consumers who don't have meters and who will likely not have meter in the next 6 months are going to be those who are going to pay more and get less. You see, the idea of increasing tariff is good if it is going to help with the financing, but at the same time, if you are metered, then it can incentivize conservative behavior of consumers so that people will minimize waste in power sector. So the system gains, they themselves gain in terms of lesser volumetric impact. They're not going to have high bills because they are reducing their consumption by being conservatory. But when they don't have meter, they're exposed to.
You know, in terms of the segregation you talked about, Mr. Madi, I think now they're transitioning to high demand and low demand, consumers. But just like you said, so obviously this increase for especially the high demand doesn't mean that electricity supply will necessarily get better, at least for now. Now, a lot of people are looking to the regulatory body, the NERC, saying, what are you going to say? And, the DISCOs have put out a statement saying, well, whether the NERC says something or not, we're going ahead with this. So in terms of the role of the NERC, especially in enforcing this, ensuring that the fine prints are done well such that this goes smoothly, what do you say regarding their role?
Well, the NERC role is big, and I think they're trying. For example, they talked about prohibiting estimation or capping estimation and of course, they've started threatening some DISCos and not comply. So NERC has a big role to, first, estimation has to be capped and reviewed from time to time. Secondly, they have a big role to ensure, even if the meters are available, there's also a logistic problem with the DISCos or even incentive problem to meter aggressively. So the regulator still has a responsibility to ensure that metering happens as it ought to happen concerning the finance of the sector. So that's a big role. Again, when we started with CAPME, which in my view remain a better option than what we are doing now, what does that mean? That the very quick fix of this sector, which may be expensive, is to meter everybody. In fact, if you meter everybody, then you can allow the price to roll. So this sector needs a breather, financial breather, and it might come from consumers. We're going to go from consumers who are sure that they are paying what they are consuming, even if the rate of consumption is high. We can all accept that, look, we need to finance this sector from, crowdsourcing for funding from consumers. But then the question is, are some people having a fair share of that cost? So NRC's role with tariff reviews, I think they should probably allow this tariff to go as planned with some caveats. Don't forget that this builds back into the economics of the national budget post-COVID. You're going to talk in terms of a depleted real income for households. You're talking in terms when government wants to improve stimulus so that people have more money and spend themselves out of recession. So the cost impact of this tariff increase in terms of general inflation is huge. Don't forget about 30% of production cost is energy related. And for households, for small businesses, it might be more. So what this means is that we're going to witness a general price inflation. Then if you couple that with unemployment, you have stagflation in an era where the government fiscal buffers and protections are very low and very weak. So I think that really this is something we should proceed with a lot of caution and with a sense, not of triumph, that look, these things are going to improve, but a sense in which the NRC goes back to the basics and try to, as we improve the finances of the DISCos, we improve their prudence, we improve their investment in relevant areas, we improve their managerial, change management, so that at least in the short to medium term, you will have some improvement that go with this inevitable price increase. I would argue that it's next to ensure that somehow the DISCos
let me take it from there on to Honorable Waive. Well, he's just talking about the service delivery, but there's supposed to be a charter on service delivery. They talk about those who get longer hours, well, you have to pay a little more, much as there are questions as to whether or not that is the nature of that policy. But speaking specifically about the charter on service delivery, so is it that the House or the committee, or is it there now such that if there's an increase, and assuming I'm supposed to get 20 hours of uninterrupted power supply, and I pay for 20 hours of uninterrupted power supply, and it turns out that I don't get that 20 hours, what happens? Are they going to say, okay, well, if you pay for 20 and you got 10 or 8 or 15, you get the other ones free. Is that being considered? And why shouldn't they be if it's not?
Yeah, that's a very intelligent question, especially when you are dealing with systems that can be disrupted along the line. I think NERC has a responsibility to come up with something along that line. It's a new system we are beginning, and we hope that as we face challenges, tools will be developed to handle the issue. But right now, the position is you pay for what you get, so that if an area is supposed to get 20, 24 hours, or that's what they usually get, and based on that, their tariff has gone up, but something happens and the tariff comes down. That's why there's regulation. The Regulatory Commission will have to come in and structure that a bit. Remember that the federal government is doing a lot to make electricity available. There's the World Bank $750 million loan. There is the Siemens $2 billion, and several other things being put in place to ensure that we have stable electricity across the country. Government is not thinking that some people should have 5 hours and some have 20 hours. What government is thinking is 24 hours, 24/7. And the House of Representatives, indeed the National Assembly, is standing for that to happen, for Nigerians to have uninterrupted power supply. Those who started with us to unbundle their electricity systems, like India, like Ghana, they've gone ahead of us, and today privatization has really taken a foothold. The discos have a lot to do to catch up, and we have a responsibility to oversight.
And speaking about your responsibility,
is going around the discourse in the country.
Okay, let me follow up on that, on your responsibility. Is your committee going to then mandate the NERC to come up with that charter such that, and give them a timeline within which, if you have to increase this tariff, because this will not be the last time we will talk about tariff increase. So there has to be something to ensure that both parties fulfill their own end of the bargain and not just lump the burden on the consumers.
Yeah, there is. You know, the Regulatory Commission is required to check this tariff twice yearly, and such that it's not something once and for all and you forget it. Every year, 2 times in a year, Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, working with the DISCOs, come up with a new tariff. The DISCOs, of course, will bring up their own proposals, and any RC would look at it and check what's on the ground. So there's a mechanism in place already. It's just that it has not been allowed to come to play, and that is what we are expecting will come to play from the 1st of July. The DISCOs will definitely have to pay their obligations to government, and we have to monitor. Nigerians also have to stand on that and monitor and make sure that we pay only for what we get. The system is there in place. It's not something to develop afresh. It's just that it has not been put to test, to use. And what is beginning now is that it's not going to be put to use, and everybody will be there to look at it and see how it functions. This is inevitable. We can't run away from it. The Power Consumers Assistance Fund, PCAF, that is meant for vulnerable groups, has to be put into action at this moment. We have to kickstart it. And it's only when we do a thing like this that we can kickstart it. And the National Assembly will not sit down and see Nigerians pay for darkness or pay for what they don't receive. We are not going to allow that. And at the same time, we want to see that power supply increases in this country so that we can be a part of the civilized world, be a part of the developed nations of the world.
We will come back. We'll be back and let both of you just talk a little more on this matter, including shedding some more light on some of those points that you've just mentioned in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. We're talking about this planned increase with the electricity tariff. It's supposed to take off on the 1st of July. Well, Dr. Sam Amadi, stay with us, former chairman of NERC, to give us at least insight perspectives on how some of these things should work. Well, Dr. Amadi, I was talking about the charter on service delivery just before we went to break. And then What's going on with that? Because most of what is usually said when it comes to this increase is just we need to increase this in order to meet up with certain things. There really isn't that much emphasis on that component, such that if you don't meet up with your obligations, you have to do something about compensating the consumers. Why are they usually silent on that? Or do we miss it when they say it, if at all they say it?
Well, I think that's a very good observation. Even when I was there, we were not doing much to compensate customers. There were occasions, one or two occasions, where there was price gouging, and we intervened in the 1004 cases and so many others, and we forced the disco then to refund customers. So, but let's put it this way: the proclivity of regulators in our own developed economy, where they're trying to create market, is that we focus more often on production, on how to enable transactions, on how to balance the book of operators, but we don't balance the book of consumers. And so that's a proclivity, a bias, even in developed economies. And that's what regulators have to watch. Now, what matters is how to create a balance. Oftentimes, regulators also don't have the capacity. We forget that regulation is asymmetrical. The discos, the operators have better knowledge about their cost profile, better information than regulators. So regulators have to improve their data set, their data analysis and capabilities. They also have to improve monitoring and evaluation and the supervision. That's why we opened the zonal offices, and we're talking about state offices. And now, because of other constraints, NEC, I understand, have rolled back that. They don't have the zonal offices. You need to have intensity in monitoring, especially with the behavior of corporations that are regulated all over the world, is to game the system. It's difficult for the US, for example, to deal with telecom. You really need to understand their business profile, their cost profile, and effectively see where they're hiding the dead bodies. And so I think that apart from people thinking that the regulator has been compromised, it could be actually they lack capacity to do a lot of that work. But then that's not an excuse. We need to now begin to balance the book of consumers and those of the operators.
And
one area is the
yeah. Sorry, so speaking about that, what is wrong with them or having meters that can actually tell how much or how many hours of electricity that people have consumed? That can happen here.
It should be elementary. In fact, the rule says nobody ought to be on the network who's not metered by a working, perhaps now digital meter. That's the rule. But what happened is that we had a legacy. We ran this sector with no metering. As at 2012, I think, when I commissioned the first metering inquiry, with the metering report says we are less than 40% of Nigerian consumers who have metered. Today, it's maybe higher, 45% or even the same 40%, because new consumers are coming to the network, and the metering we are doing is just basically like moving the chairs and replacing them again. So the question is that we had a legacy crisis of metering. Maybe what we should have done before privatizing would have been to see metering as a national commitment, meter everybody, and then unleash the market force. But we unleash the market force without metering. And so when people say, look, in fact, somebody came to us and say, why should you not allow us? Okay, the option is for us to abolish everybody who doesn't have a meter. Until you have a meter, no electricity. That will be collapse of service. So the crisis we have now is to how to manage metering. It's a simple thing. If you have a device, you can then, for example, even if it's not analog or it's post-paid meter, you can come back in 2 months and read. You can estimate for 1 month, which is what the law allows, 1, 2 months. The third month, you come back to rectify, reindex the tariff, the bill to what is actually it is. But today, even with post-paid meters that are still functioning, the discos don't go around reading the meters. They send this indiscriminate bill. So I think that we're dealing with a perfect storm of legacy crisis, of a complexity that are increasing every day, and the capacity to deal with them. Above all, the financing. And so government is taking more, investing more in the network, even though it has been privatized, and then consumers have to pay more. So I think we can't burn the candle at both ends. So if we're going to allow the tariff to be cost reflective, which I think is the right thing to do, then government should now focus on subsidizing, on helping consumption of those who cannot consume, and improving monitoring and regulation. So if we're going to be helping the discos with financing, then at the same time, we are asking consumers to consume more in a very difficult economic circumstance. It's burning the candle at both ends, and the result will be that we'll increase poverty, we will also increase household consumption, and that will slow down the recovery in the depression. We need to
pick up on that, Dr. Ahmad. Let me quickly pick up on that, because for consumers, they say, well, the service should get better, then we'll be, motivated to pay more. But obviously, the discourse are saying, well, pay more first, and then the service will get better. And clearly, like you have mentioned, there is an issue of investment, having more financing to invest more and get more infrastructure such that, power supply will be improved. So we have those that will be classified as maximum demand consumers now paying more. I hear that those that don't consume as much will pay less. We'll probably speak to the Honorable to clear the air on that. But what is the guarantee that now that, those who consume more, pay more, would start paying that higher tariff, that the supply will get better eventually? Should there even be a time frame such that you say, okay, after 6 months, that we need to see considerable improvement in service delivery?
Well, I guess that question is for me. I think for me, the challenge is, are we sure that things will actually get better in the short while? I like being truthful so that consumers know. I think there should be increase in communication. Yes, things can get better. Those who consume more should pay more. But the question is, are you talking about consume more in terms of volume? Are you talking about consume more in terms of the quality of power, which is actually determined by whether you are MD, maximum demand, which means you are compared to the transformer, and so your quality of power is improved. Anyhow you do it, I think the regulator has to show that that costs in the industry are borne proportionate to service delivery. That's number one. Number two is, for me, is that, look, there are many things to be done to improve service. One is better regulation. I think they are getting there. Second is the policy confusion, the threat around disinvestment or naturalizing the asset creates confusion. The discourse really need to go out and get money. And if they can't get the money, because this is a sector you invest and recover later. What we are suffering from is not just that consumers are not paying enough, is that the operators don't have the capacity, or the market is not friendly for them to borrow as they ought to borrow. So I think the emphasis should not be placed on a quick recovery. We're not going to have quick improvement right now. We're going to have a delayed improvement, because you need to really dig deep and change the network and improve it. So anybody who is telling us that, look, once in July 1st you start paying the new tariff, you're going to have improved service, we are taking the people back to the old alley of deception where they failed. The real issue that this sector is in a mess. And to start digging out, we need to do the basics, which includes a tariff that is good enough, at the same time, which includes effective regulation, which includes policy clarity, and which includes commitment to investment by the operators. So we need to help them get access to financing, even though it's difficult in the COVID era, but they need to get financing and invest. And if they don't have the capacity, we should not be thinking, is it time for competition? Is it time to further liberalize the network? Is it time to use the regulatory processes to get in more investors who can come and own part of the asset and therefore bring in financing? But my view is, look, there will be improvement, but it might be improvement that we'll lose when there's collapse of system.
Well, Dr. Ahmadi, just a moment. Let me take it to Honorable Waive. I mean, you've raised some issues. You talked about the quality of service. And, Honorable Waive, for a lot of people, they wouldn't mind, like I said, if the service improves and then they have to pay more. But then you take a look at the quality of service, low voltage, for example. So you have to get additional equipment just to power some of your equipment. That is costing more. Some of them get 1 day on, 1 day off. And, maybe for the distribution company, they give 20 hours to that location. But inside that same location, they have to split it 1 day off. That's for Honorable Waive, actually. And they have to split it 1 day on, 1 day off. That's another challenge. I could go on and on with what a lot of people face. I was going through a poll by one of his distribution companies, and they were asking for how many hours do you get power? And a majority of people say less than 5 hours daily. So if you're saying that those that get more power will pay a higher tariff, how are we sure we'll even make enough money to invest or reinvest in the sector? It's not quite clear. So what are you doing exactly to have a fine blueprint on that?
Yes, the service-based tariff is such that discos will now be motivated to provide better services in order to earn more money, such that they will be able to pay their obligations to government. That's the goal. But there are challenges with the discourse, and the National Assembly is doing a lot to look at the Power Sector Review Act to see how we can do some bring up some changes. If you follow the news, you will know that in both chambers of the National Assembly at the moment, there is a committee, other committees, work going on to review what has been happening in the power sector. The essence in the beginning, the aim, the goal in the beginning was to increase investment, improve efficiency, attract foreign investment and all of that. But whether or not we have seen that happen is a different story. So we're working on that to see how we can change that so that Nigerians can have the best. For example, the management of each of these discos, the federal government have 40% shares, but yet has only one director who is not executive, and the discos are allowed to run the show. The problem here is that what have they brought to the table? What has improved infrastructure-wise? So that is why we have these problems we're talking about, one day on, one day off, power not being constantly available. They seem to have been left on their own, as it were. And those are the changes that are going to come with these investigations we are doing, with these reviews that are going to come of the Power Review Act that we're working on. Foreign investment must be attracted to the sector, and Nigerians must be willing to pay where the services are available, because the issue here with Nigerians and electricity is one, the issue of affordability and the willingness to pay. You put that side by side, pari passu, with the quality of service that is available to the Nigerian people. In many areas, the quality of service has not been good, and this issue of service tariff, service-based tariff, is the key to solve that problem. It's not just cost-based anymore.
Well, that's exactly where I think I'd like to take you up on that question. I was going to ask you just before you brought it up. This is not the first time we're having electricity tariff increase, and there is a system through which, I mean, a schedule, so to speak, through which this usually happens. What is the assurance we have? Because I believe there ought to be milestones that if you attain this milestone, then we can consider another tariff increase. There were milestones before this one given by the NERC and the federal government. I don't know if the House Committee is also aware of that you meet these milestones and then we can talk about an increase in tariff. One of those milestones is metering, and you say it is still in the works. Another one is what Chamberlain asked about the other time, the service charter. No, nothing effective so far. I'm pretty sure that your constituents will be asking you questions about the power sector. So are there milestones that will be given, just in case this one goes on? Are there milestones that have been given or that must be given, that without these milestones, no further increase in tariff?
Of course, there are milestones, and the review period is usually every 6 months. But you must remember that the last increase was in 2016. So there have not been any increase since 2016. So now that the increase is coming for the first time in, say, 4 years, every 6 months there will be a review. And the standards have been, the milestones are clearly there. Metering, for example, that you have said, is there. Pari passu, take it side by side with the issue of capping, billing capping, such that estimated billing is no longer attainable. And if you don't have a meter, your bill must not be more than the neighbor who has a meter. That's the capping that the NERC has put in place, and we monitor that to see that that happens. So if this happens on the 1st of July, by the end of December, we'll be able to come back and look at it. What has happened so far? Who got increased in tariff? Did they get the required service? How many new meters got into the system? These are the checks and balances that will come in. Are there complaints from consumers who were charged but yet didn't get that number of hours of service? All of this will be reviewed biannually. That is what the standard says, and that's what we are going to do. Of course,
so
my constituents are asking, and we are doing our bit to make sure that we put the discos on their toes. The discos really need to sit up, and we cannot sit down and wait for them forever. And that is why we are moving on. And the entire country would have to...
apologies there, but Honorable Ive, we know the CBN and how they regulate the banks. We know the NCC, what they do, how they regulate the telecom sector. But for the NERC, what indices did they take a look at? What is this predicated on? How did they arrive at the costs? How did they determine the cost of electricity to be paid, either for R3, D3, whichever?
Well, the NERC has done their job. I don't work for them, but I know that they look at the exchange rate, they look at inflation, they look at the volume, the service delivery, they look at the volume of electricity that is put there into the market. And the discos have the responsibility of being the point in this chain of generation, transmission, and distribution where the income flows from. They relate with the consumers, the end consumers, and collect the inflow. That's their responsibility. And NERC monitors.
Let me just jump in and ask this. I asked because, I mean, you oversight them, so we thought that you have interfaced and checked that the data that they have is not just the one supplied by the discos only. Is that the case?
Yes, sure. It's not just that supplied by the discos. NERC goes out there and they do their own bit, and we oversight that. And like I mentioned earlier, if not for COVID, we would have been out in the field already with the discos, checking what is happening on ground, cross-checking with the reports that we have from NERC. But very soon we'll be out there to cross-check what NERC has given to us,
okay,
and see that the discos are compliant, particularly with this increase, to be sure that those who are experiencing the increase are getting the maximum that they should get. We are going to ensure that. You must remember that the National Assembly is people.
Honorable, that's kind of strange because, I mean, the last time we did check, I'm not sure the NERC have their own capacity to generate their own data, because these are data declared by discos. Maybe I should take it to Dr. Amadi. Let me just ask him, because he has been in the NERC. Dr. Amadi, could you shed some light on that? Because you spoke about capacity, lack of capacity on the part of the NERC, the regulatory body, to determine some of these things. So when you made reference to that, or tell us pointedly, does the NERC have capacity to generate their own data and not just the one supplied by the discos?
Well, they do, but don't forget that capacity is not a finite product. It keeps increasing. You have to improve your capacity, and vis-a-vis the challenge. But let me be clear on this. NRC has very detailed, comprehensive methodology for determining tariff. It's scientific. But then there are holes in that scientific methodology that you need to plug often and on. So, for example, before we left, we had a tariff regulation that requires that henceforth, discos will need to consult with their customers. And in those consultation meetings, by the discos, not with the regulator, they will send people, they give us video, and then the consumers will come as a group as well. Rate hearing. Now, what happened is that the rigor we employ on rate hearing is low. What that requires that, look, a disco wants to increase his tariff. It shouldn't be a blanket tariff increase. You go to Keja, call meetings, and tell consumers, these are the next investment that we need. This investment will create this level of improvement. And this is why we need to make this investment. It's a proven investment. The regulator has looked at the prudence check and relevance check and said the price tag for this investment is appropriate. Okay, after that consultation, you take all those, the NEC already has their people attending those meetings and therefore taking their independent report. And then, of course, the disco will now file his request or his request for tariff increase with all these documentations. Then the regulator will now have a almost quasi-judicial hearing where customers and other epistemic communities, researchers, scientists, economists, can come in as interveners. And then they prudently examine whether a case has been made. A rate case is like a case in the court, because that's why the law says fair and just tariff. Fair, just, they imply due process, they imply rule of law, they imply justification for increase. Now, that is the way to go, and that's the way that ensures we will consumers and for operators. But what happened is, like I said, I talk about capacity, is that first is procedural regulatory due process. Oftentimes, because of the challenges of the sector, because we need to inflate the sector financially, we might not go through all this process. So that's one crisis area. The second crisis area is that the consumers are not organized. And unlike other countries of the world, like developed economies, we are sectors. Professional epistemic communities are concerned about pricing and about how regulators do their work. So those groups will be the ones who will intervene and write and challenge the methodology. Our methodology was crafted at the beginning of privatization. Many things need to be changed, and that's why the legislators are not putting pressure. I remember, you are doing well, but you don't need to go to the field. You will see nothing. You need to focus on the data. You need to ask the regulator to provide a detailed explanation of their policy.
Just one moment. There was something that you said now that I'd like to get clarity on. When you say the consumers are not organized, please shed some light, because on the one hand, there are... please, go on, please.
Yeah, the key thing about regulation is balance of force and balance of outcome. So when I was a regulator, I saw that consumers are disparate. That means they are scattered, different households, different people. They are not organized as a group in order to fight for their interest. So when a company that hires scientists, engineers, economists, comes with data to deceive the regulator, who is defending the consumer in that meeting? And that's why I created the Consumer Advocacy Network. It was the first time a regulator tried to bring together consumers. And the idea was very simple. You have to create a balance of power.
Dr. Amadi, just one moment. I'm sorry, we need to begin to wrap up now. But let me ask you this. Given the volume of challenges in the power sector, how significant is this tariff increase to solve the problem of the power sector?
The truth, my brother, is that the problem of the sector is not just tariff. In my estimation, lack of tariff, cost of tariff is probably less than 30% the cost. The problem are twofold. One is modeling. The notion of our privatization carried out effort in improving commerciality and corporate governance. So we focus so much on privatizing with the assumption that private ownership is a source of efficiency. What gives efficiency is the quality of rules in the sector, governance. So now NEC is now trying to build up those corporate governance capabilities of operators. That's one. Second is that the idea is that tariff alone will not solve this financial crisis, because essentially, if you're going to have a real cost-effective tariff, then electricity will be under consumed, which is a public good, and government would allow that. So you need to look also at the financing profile capability of the investors as you look at the tariff profile. So you are improving tariff, they're also improving their capacity to spend and recover over time. So what we have seen is that we privatized and we didn't have pocketed investors, and of course the investment climate didn't allow for the level of investment that we need to crowd in from financial houses, from capital money market. We didn't have that. The central bank weighed in and helped, and today the debt overhang from the sector is becoming a contagion to the banking sector. And so everyone is trying to push away this debt because they are...
Dr. Amadi, pardon me, we need to also get at least his concluding thought, Honorable Waive. So in all of this, we haven't really heard how, because you've spoken in favor of this July 1st tariff increase, but the thing about it is that consumers don't seem to get the point. I mean, if I'm going to pay more and they're supposed to supply me more and I don't get it, what's the reference? How do I seek redress? How do you measure the quality of service that's been delivered? If not, look, we're all going to be having the short end of the stick.
Yeah, we cannot, as Nigerians, continue to live at the mercy of this discourse. We must attract other investors. And in order to do that, the tariff must be attractive to investors. Otherwise, it will continue to be a monopoly in different areas where a discourse is in charge. And they think
what is attractive tariff?
Is to ensure that we have alternatives by attracting investment.
What would an attractive tariff be?
I didn't get that.
What will an attractive tariff be?
That would have to be worked out. It's not something to just throw out. It's something to be worked out between the regulator, the discos, and the Nigerian people. We must get to the point where somebody who invests in electricity distribution, for example, should be able to get returns on investment. In that way, other investors will come and there will be a competition on getting the best to serve as discos.
We get the point, but isn't that placing the cart before the horse? If you're going to invest and get your return on investment, you can't shortchange people. There has to be something. If I pay for service and you don't deliver, am I supposed to look the other way?
The challenge here, Chamberlain, is that the price structure, the tariff is regulated. So if I'm going to invest and I'm told that this is the capping I can charge, and I know I can't get my returns on that, it discourages me from investing. That's the issue. Going forward, we are going to do this oversight around the country, and we are encouraging consumers to come when we come to different areas.
Consumers came before and they said, look, they didn't want tariff increase. But here we are, it's still going to happen. But we do thank you for your time anyway.
We can't run away from it, Chamberlain.
Honorable Francis Waive is the Deputy Chairman, House Committee on Power. We also did speak with Dr. Sam Amadi, who's a former chairman of NERC. Gentlemen, thank you both for talking to us today. We're back in a moment. Don't go away.